to you, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Okay, you're thrust into the limelight as a 17-year-old on Britain's Got Talent. How old do you think you were when you realised you had that voice?
In 2012, a 17-year-old boy shocked the world on Britain's Got Talent. Jonathan Antoine's voice was pure magic. But behind the fame was a secret he kept for 28 years. The bullying started when he was just 4 years old. Kids threw food at him. Teachers found him crying alone. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. What happened to Jonathan wasn't just about weight or shyness. It was something deeper, something that explained why he felt so different his whole life. The truth he finally revealed will break your heart. Jonathan Antoine was born on January 13, 1995 in Chigwell, Essex. On the outside, it looked like a quiet, privileged place to grow up. But inside his world, things were different. From an early age, Jonathan showed signs of rare musical talent. By 6, he had perfect pitch, something only about 1 in 10,000 people have. But while his gift was rare, no one paid much attention. Instead, Jonathan spent his school days being bullied so badly that teachers often found him crying alone. He used to hum long melodies to calm himself down. His mother, Julie, later shared that during the worst moments, he would quietly compose entire songs in his head. Even though he was showing signs of depression by the age of 8, his brain was doing something extraordinary. He could hear an opera once and remember every part. Doctors would later say he had a form of musical savant syndrome, something that shows up in fewer than 1 in 1,000 people. His struggle with weight began even earlier. When he was just 4, food became the only thing that brought him comfort. By 5, he was already 40 pounds heavier than he should have been. By 6, he weighed 95 pounds, more than double the average for his age. Kids threw food at him during lunch and called him cruel names. And the more they teased him, the more he turned to eating for comfort. At 10 years old, Jonathan weighed 154 pounds. His mother tried everything. She even mortgaged their house twice just to afford therapy, but nothing seemed to work. Experts would later diagnose him with a condition called trauma-induced hyperphagia, which affects only about 2% of bullied children and leads to extreme weight gain. The moment his voice was discovered came when no one expected it. He was 10 years old and a substitute music teacher named Mrs. Williams was holding a normal choir audition. Jonathan tried to hide behind the other kids, but once he opened his mouth, everyone heard something that didn't seem real. His voice had the strength and tone of an adult tenor. Mrs. Williams later said it sounded like Pavarotti trapped in a child's body. An analysis of that first recording showed that Jonathan's voice could hit a frequency range far beyond what most children can manage. Even more surprising, he had natural vibrato, something that usually takes singers 20 years to learn. Within just a few weeks, he was singing solos meant for adults. He didn't need a microphone. His voice was measured at 95 dB, strong enough to fill a 2,000-seat hall. That moment was later called one of the most important discoveries in British music education. At 15, Jonathan entered the Stratford and East London Music Festival. He weighed 298 pounds and stood just over 5 feet tall. He was up against 47 other singers, many of them professionally trained for years. His biggest rival was 17-year-old Victoria Sterling, who had already sung at the Royal Opera House. Jonathan chose to sing Nessun Dorma. By the time he finished, nearly 2,000 people had packed into a space meant for 1,200. The crowd gave him a standing ovation that lasted more than 4 minutes. One of the judges, Sir David Wilcox, gave him a score of 98 out of 100, the highest ever in the festival's history. Along with a prize of $2,500, he got a recording offer. But more than that, for the first time, he felt what it was like to be cheered instead of mocked. That same year, he got accepted into the Royal Academy of Music's junior program. It was a rare moment. Out of more than 2,800 people who applied, only 23 were chosen. Jonathan's audition was nearly perfect, even though he had vomited twice beforehand due to nerves. His teacher at the academy said his voice sounded like it belonged to a trained 25-year-old. The school usually charged over £8,000 a year, but they waived a fee after his mother showed how hard things were for them financially. Jonathan's weekends became packed with training. 6 hours of singing technique, 4 hours of theory, and 2 hours of performance coaching. At first, the other students ignored him because of how he looked, but 3 months later, he was cast in the lead role of the Magic Flute, making him the youngest person ever to do so in the Academy's long history. In 2011, everything began to change when Jonathan's high school music teacher, Jenny Ewington, made a bold decision. She paired Jonathan, who was 17 and still weighed over 20 stone, with a 16-year-old named Charlotte Giaconelli. Charlotte had the confidence Jonathan lacked. She'd been performing since she was 8 and loved the spotlight. Jenny wasn't guessing. She picked Charlotte because she knew her strong stage presence could balance out Jonathan's powerful but shy voice. Their first duet was the prayer performed in front of just 15 students. But even in that small room, Jenny knew she had found something special. Jonathan and Charlotte were complete opposites. He practiced opera for hours each day, but avoided people. She had performed in over 30 musicals by age 16 and loved every second of being on stage. But when they sang together, their voices blended in a way that felt rare. Jonathan's tenor voice reached from C3 to C5. Charlotte's soprano voice went from C4 to C6. A music producer who heard their early recordings said it was the kind of vocal pairing that only happens once in a generation. But behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. Charlotte had to push Jonathan constantly. He would sometimes have panic attacks before rehearsals and hide in the school bathroom. She would go find him, calm him down, and pull him back to the music room. To build confidence, they started performing at local events. Between February and April of 2012, they sang at 23 venues, churches, retirement homes, weddings, even pubs. Their first paid job was an Easter service at a local church where they earned £50 each. Then came a big moment at the Epping Forest Country Club where they performed for 200 people at a charity dinner. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes and talent scouts immediately approached them. By April, they were earning £300 performance and 40 more venues were on a waiting list to book them. Their song list had grown to 15 pieces, but the prayer stayed at the heart of every performance. These small shows helped Jonathan prepare for what would come next. It was Charlotte who pushed for them to audition for Britain's Got Talent. She found out about the auditions in March 2012, but Jonathan refused at first. He didn't want to go on national TV and face people mocking him for how he looked. Charlotte didn't give up. For 3 weeks, she kept asking. She even said she'd audition alone if he didn't agree. With just 13 minutes left before the deadline, she submitted their application. The video was filmed in her bedroom. Jonathan barely showed on screen and looked terrified. When the producers called, they were only interested in Charlotte, but she said it was both or neither. The audition was scheduled for April 28th at the London Palladium. Jonathan had never even taken public transport alone, so Charlotte stayed at his house the night before to make sure he wouldn't back out. When Jonathan Antoine walked onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent in 2012, he had no idea his life was about to change forever. He was only 17. He wore a simple t-shirt, had messy hair, and looked nothing like the performers who usually impress the judges. But what happened next would stun millions. Before Jonathan even sang a note, Simon Cowell turned to fellow judge Carmen Electra and made a cruel remark. He said, "Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse." That comment was caught on camera. It was brutal, and it was only based on how Jonathan looked. But Jonathan expected it. He later said, "I don't look like a standard performer. I just went out there in my normal clothes." That moment became one of the most unforgettable pre-performance clips in BGT history. Then came the song, The Prayer. It was a powerful duet made famous by Andrea Belli and Celine Dion. Jonathan didn't choose it himself. His music teacher, Jeanette Brown, had asked him and his singing partner, Charlotte Giaconelli, to perform it at her wedding. As soon as Jonathan began to sing, the entire room changed. Within seconds, the audience was on their feet. People were crying. Simon Cowell's jaw dropped. All 4 judges gave them a yes. It wasn't just a good performance. It was a breakthrough. What shocked everyone even more was Simon's reaction afterward. The same man who mocked Jonathan minutes before was now comparing him to Luciano Pavarotti. He said, "You're a future star." Experts backed him up. Jonathan's voice was already showing vocal maturity beyond his age. They said he had the range and control of someone twice as old. The performance quickly went viral. The audition video was uploaded on March 24, 2012. In just weeks, it had more than 2.6 million views. Soon, it became the most viewed TV audition in the world. International media picked it up. People began comparing Jonathan to Susan Boyle. Even religious leaders like Pastor Vi Bosham were sharing the video and calling it a great story. Jonathan had gone from a bullied teenager to an international star overnight, but the journey was far from easy. Jonathan's past was filled with pain. At 280 pounds, he had been bullied for years. He once had a nervous breakdown at school and became a recluse. His mother, Tracy, said he would hide under a big jumper and never leave the house. So when he walked onto the BGT stage, it wasn't just a performance. It was a victory. The pressure didn't stop there. During the semifinals, Jonathan had to fight off anxiety just to stay calm. Charlotte was panicking, too. But Jonathan had learned breathing exercises to control his fear that he had to sit down before singing to steady himself. Their performance of Caruso won over the audience again. And by that point, even Simon Cowell admitted they were his favorite act in the entire show. Still, controversy struck again. Simon shocked everyone when he told Jonathan to ditch Charlotte and go solo. Jonathan didn't even hesitate. He refused. "We've come on here as a duo, and we're going to stay here as a duo," he said. That moment earned him even more respect. In the final, they were expected to win, but the results crushed their hopes. Ashley Butler and her dog Pudsey took the top prize with 39% of the public vote. Jonathan and Charlotte came second with 25.8%. It was a huge surprise. Their fans were heartbroken. Many felt it wasn't about talent anymore, but popularity. Simon Cowell didn't waste time. The day after the finale, he signed Jonathan and Charlotte to a record deal worth £11 million. Their debut album together was released that September and reached the top 10 in the UK albums chart. Simon timed the release carefully to line up with the X Factor's live shows. He knew they had to strike while the memory of their performance was still fresh. Jonathan was stunned. "I'm still pinching myself that we are actually making our own CD." He said the album featured the songs that had made them famous, including The Prayer and Caruso. It sold over 250,000 copies. Simon said their album would be stunning, and it was. A year later, they released a second album called Perhaps Love. It came out on October 14, 2013. Like their first, it reached number 5 on the UK chart. But something had changed. The album had more modern interpretations, not just classical songs. That shift revealed a deeper problem. Jonathan and Charlotte wanted different things. Jonathan was drawn to opera and serious classical music. Charlotte leaned toward musical theater and more modern styles. Their differences grew too big to ignore. Jonathan had trained in classical music for years. He was even named Young Musician of the Year at a regional festival in 2010. Charlotte, on the other hand, had come from a theater background. Their second album worked, but behind the scenes they struggled. In early 2014, they announced they would go their separate ways. They both tried to stay positive. "We're thrilled to be going back into the recording studio," they said in their joint statement. But insiders revealed that the split came after months of arguments over song choices and musical direction. Touring had also taken a toll on Jonathan. His health was already fragile. He had always struggled with his weight and self-confidence. His mother said that before BGT, he wouldn't even go outside. After the show, the pressure of media interviews, concerts, and appearances pushed him to the edge. Jonathan started having anxiety attacks. For 2 years, Jonathan and Charlotte stayed a team. They sold over 250,000 albums. Their debut album together reached number 5 on the UK charts. But in February 2014, fans were stunned. A post appeared online. The duo was splitting. Behind the scenes, Sony had offered them something unheard of: solo contracts for both at the same time. That kind of offer almost never happens. Charlotte would release her album in June, Jonathan in October. The joint statement tried to soften the blow. They had met in high school back in 2006 and shared an incredible journey, but it was clear that they were moving in different directions. Fast. The real turning point came during a meeting with Sony to plan their third album. Charlotte later said they couldn't agree on anything. Not the songs, not the tone, not even the vision. Jonathan wanted to go deeper into classical opera. Charlotte leaned toward musical theater. The divide was real. So Sony said, why not go solo? A month later, they had made up their minds. Charlotte moved quickly. In July 2014, she released Solitaire, her first solo album. And by February 2015, she had already made her professional theater debut at London's Landor Theatre. She starred as Amalia Balash in She Loves Me, a Broadway classic. The show ran from February 4th to March 7th. For her, this wasn't just a career move. It was a transformation. She was finally doing what she loved, live on stage night after night. Jonathan's journey was very different. He didn't jump in with confidence. He was afraid. At just 19, he wasn't sure if he could do it alone. Charlotte had always been the one with stage presence. She gave him courage. Now he had to find it by himself. Their success had been massive. Over 200,000 albums sold worldwide. A top 10 spot on the Billboard Classical Crossover charts. The expectations were crushing. He stepped back for a while. He trained. He healed. He tried to remember why he loved music in the first place. Fans didn't take the split well. Headlines were harsh. One even read, "She dumps him." It hurt. People had fallen in love with them as a pair. They weren't ready to let go. Some industry insiders supported the solo deals. Others worried it was too soon. Their second album, Perhaps Love, had just launched in the US in October 2013. It felt like the beginning, not the end. But Jonathan wasn't finished. In October 2014, he released Tenor, 12 classical tracks, serious opera. The album hit #1 on the official classical artist album chart. At 19, he became the youngest tenor to ever top that list. Even more surprising, the album climbed to #13 on the UK pop chart. This was a breakthrough. He wasn't just surviving solo, he was dominating. One moment stood out that year. Placido Domingo, one of the greatest tenors in history, invited Jonathan to perform as a special guest at the iTunes Festival in London. It was a moment of respect and a signal that Jonathan had arrived. By 2020, Jonathan took on his boldest project yet, a full concept album. Going the Distance was released on June 5th. It took 3 years to complete. A collaboration with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra produced by Grammy winner Greg Field. This was not just another album. It was a story told in 3 acts inspired by Jonathan's own journey. For the first time, he sang Nessun Dorma, the aria that made Pavarotti a legend. And to cap it all off, PBS aired a concert special on March 15th, full orchestra, full choir. At 25, Jonathan had become the performer people once only imagined he could be. And then in 2024, he surprised everyone again. This time with By Request, the Diane Warren song Book 1, 8 tracks, just 33 minutes. A collaboration with one of pop music's biggest names, Diane Warren. She has written for Celine Dion, Aerosmith, Lady Gaga, and now Jonathan. When Jonathan Antoine stepped onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent in 2012, he was just 17. Shy, overweight, and shaking with nerves. No one expected what came next. His voice stunned the world. He didn't just sing. He soared. That single performance changed his life. But what the audience never saw was the deep confusion and silent battles he had carried for years. And it would take more than a decade before the truth finally came out. In early 2023, during an interview in Australia, Jonathan shared something he had never told the public before. He had been diagnosed with autism. The news came just after his 27th birthday in late 2022. For him, it felt like a daydream. For the people closest to him, it was a shock. No one had suspected it. Not during his rise to stardom. Not after 5 successful albums. Not even as he performed around the world. But the diagnosis made everything make sense. Suddenly, years of emotional turmoil, social anxiety, and confusion had an explanation. It wasn't an excuse. It was clarity. That same year, he posted a message on Instagram for World Autism Awareness Day. He wrote about how the diagnosis changed how he saw himself. He admitted it was scary, but he also called it liberating. For 28 years, Jonathan had faced challenges that seemed impossible to understand. He struggled with emotions that felt too big. He felt drained after interviews. He battled constant pressure and criticism, especially after his sudden fame. All of it had been happening while he quietly lived with undiagnosed autism. The reaction to his public confession was immediate and overwhelming. During that same interview, his voice trembled as he admitted this was the first time he was speaking about it publicly. He explained that having an explanation for all those difficult moments felt like a relief. Not knowing for so long had made life feel even harder. He said it plainly. It felt like he had spent 28 years in the dark. Behind the spotlight, the pain had always been there. Jonathan had been bullied for his weight since he was 4. After BGT, the scrutiny only got worse. The fame came fast, but the criticism came faster. He often felt misunderstood. Looking back now, he realizes many of his struggles were signs of something deeper, and the fact that no one caught it sooner shows how hidden autism can be in people who are gifted or creative. But instead of getting stuck in regret, Jonathan decided to speak up, not just for himself, but for others. He began using his platform to advocate for mental health and neurodiversity. He joined campaigns like Classic FM's Make Some Noise and became a patron for pediatric brain tumor research. On social media, he wrote openly about how autism affects daily life. He didn't just post slogans, he explained what it felt like. He wanted to help others who might be struggling in silence, just like he had for 28 years. His voice reached millions, and that made his words matter. But his personal journey didn't stop there. Around the same time he was coming to terms with autism, he was also changing his body. Jonathan had struggled with his weight his entire life. By the time he appeared on BGT, he weighed about 280 pounds. But in the years that followed, he made a huge shift. In 2013, he joined Weight Watchers and lost more than 50 pounds in just 4 months. Eventually, he lost 5 stone or 70 pounds, and he kept it off. The transformation was so drastic that fans sometimes didn't recognize him in photos. But it wasn't just about appearances. It was about feeling healthier and more in control. One big reason he had struggled with weight loss in the past was an undiagnosed thyroid condition. Once doctors found it, everything changed. He finally understood why losing weight had always been so difficult. Managing the thyroid issue gave him the boost he needed, and he used it. He built a daily routine that became sacred. Starting January 12th, he committed to walking 10,000 steps a day. Since then, he has only missed 2 days. No matter where he was or what he had to do, he stuck to it. He would even pace around in one spot to hit his goal. For him, walking wasn't just exercise. It was a way to take charge of his life. It burned calories. It cleared his mind. And it gave him structure. Some days it was the one thing that helped him feel in control. He later said, "I feel stronger and healthier than I have in 10 years. That means the last time he felt this good was back when his career had just started. He still has more goals to reach, but now he's doing it with more clarity, more strength, and more peace. Taking back his health also helped him heal mentally. It wasn't just about numbers on a scale. It was about fighting back after years of feeling stuck. Through it all, Jonathan found love in a very unexpected way. He met Canadian waitress Michelle Jussier online through a web chat service. Their relationship started at a time when he felt lost. He had just parted ways with his longtime duet partner Charlotte Giaconelli and was trying to figure out who he was as a solo artist. Michelle gave him stability and encouragement. She became his muse and helped him rebuild his confidence. She even inspired his album Belief, and he openly called her the light of his life. Even though they lived in different countries, Michelle often traveled from Canada to support Jonathan. Their relationship became public in 2016, and they appeared together at the film premiere of Florence Foster Jenkins. Michelle wasn't just someone in the background. She played an active role in Jonathan's creative process. He said she understood him perfectly. That support became even more valuable as he dealt with the emotional weight of his autism diagnosis and the demands of his career. Meanwhile, his connection with Charlotte faded. Fans often wondered if they still talked. But in a 2017 interview, Jonathan said they barely spoke anymore. He explained that when you're working non-stop, there isn't time for old friendships. Their split happened after meeting with Sony where they couldn't agree on songs for a third album. Eventually, the label suggested doing solo projects. It was an emotional decision, and it took them a month to decide. But when they did, there was no going back. Now, Jonathan is preparing to tell his full story on film. A documentary about his life is in the works with plans to begin production in 2023 or 2024. The project is led by David J. Baird and might be called Beyond the High Sea. It will explore the deep bullying Jonathan faced as a child and follow his journey from isolation to international acclaim. The film promises to reveal things the public has never seen, including footage from his early career and insights into his recent diagnosis. It could be the most complete portrait of Jonathan ever made. Even with all his personal challenges, Jonathan has built an impressive career. His net worth is now estimated at $4 million. His YouTube channel has over 64 million views. That alone has brought in about $190,000 in ad revenue. His music streams regularly attract more than 50,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. His solo albums Tenor and Believe both reached #1 on the UK classical charts. And through it all, he never abandoned his classical roots. He didn't trade his art for quick fame.